It's Darkside Phil's Top 13 Most Disappointing Games of 2017 Countdown. Number 5, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. Oh boy. As a longtime fighting game aficionado, a former professional fighting game player, and someone who's been around the block and played every competitive fighting game for the past 25 years, to see how far Capcom has fallen is really disappointing. Last year's Street Fighter V by far was the most disappointing fighting game of the year, and Capcom has done it again with Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. Why is MVC Infinite so bad? Well, is it the animations and the design of the characters trying to be more realistic than cartoony like they were in Marvel vs. Capcom and Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3? No, not really. Even though the characters don't look good, you could kind of bypass that. Is it the online connections? No, not really. Even though a lot of the times the connections are bad, it doesn't necessarily ruin the game. What ruins the game is that once again Capcom has lost touch with what makes a game good when it comes to the core of fighting elements. It has none of the things that make a competitive fighting game good. There are no footsies, there are no spacing, there are no reactionary moves. Literally, the gameplay of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite is as follows. Select your character, select another character, select your gem. Activate the game. Now you have to look for a chance to land a 50-50 mix-up, meaning you're trying to confuse your opponent from either blocking high, low, or left-right, hit them once, leading to a ginormous, insanely huge combo that you can randomly tag in and out to your other character to do even more damage and try to kill that opponent with one combo. When the combo ends, now it's your chance to go for another 50-50 mix-up and do the same thing. Literally, ladies and gentlemen, the entirety of the gameplay of MVC Infinite is that. It takes out about 90% of the core gameplay elements of what make a competitive fighting game good and dumb it down to become a flashy combo exhibition engine rather than a competitive fighter that's worth playing. This game is donkey duty. It is terrible, and after about 1 week of the game being released, everyone had already figured out all the incredibly overpowered, long-ass, high-damage combos, because they all put them on the internet and streamed all over the internet, and therefore everything was already discovered, the game was already degraded down into mush, and right now the game is all but dead. I even see major people in the fighting game community, even major tournament organizers, are questioning whether or not MVC Infinite is completely dead and anyone even cares about it anymore. Answer being probably not, because you can tell that the people who made the game didn't care about the competitive nature. They just wanted to make a flashy game for stream viewers and stream monsters rather than something worth playing. It's far worse than MVC3 and Ultimate MVC3 ever was. It's a piece of crap, and at this point, if you've been thinking about playing it, my advice is skip it because you're just wasting your time and effort on a piece of shit. Number 4, Destiny 2. For those of you who are fans of mine, I don't think you're going to be surprised to see this game appear on my most disappointing games countdown. And although I did actually enjoy playing through this game cooperatively with a few friends of mine, sadly I hate to say it wasn't because of the game that I had a good time, but it was more because of the personalities and the cooperation and the interaction between the people playing rather than the game itself that entertainment factor was valid. Destiny 2 is a game that claims it advances on the first game and adds in all kinds of new story and plot line. Sadly, I hate to tell you guys, it really doesn't. The story of Destiny 2 is fluff, just like the story of Destiny 1 was. It's not very good. You can beat it relatively quickly, and it becomes superfluous. Ultimately, what the game becomes is a grind to try to unlock all of the different content, whether it's the different stages of attacks that you can do on big bosses together, whether it's the raid events, etc., etc. Sadly, Destiny 2 does not have a lasting appeal. It just doesn't. After you play the game for about a week to a week and a half, you could pretty much have seen all of the content available in the game. And most people who bought Destiny 2 were already complaining, you know, it's the same enemies, it's the same kind of locations, it's the same kind of deal with the story. It's pretty much the same game as Destiny 1. All they did was tweak a few things, like, for example, make it easier to get the higher level loot so you can up your power level and do the higher level cooperative campaigns and such. But for the most part, it's the same exact freaking game as the first one. And within 2 weeks, most people who had bought it were already complaining they had nothing left to do. Well, here comes December, time to release an expansion for Destiny 2, and all those same Muppets run out and buy it, even though they complained the game wasn't very good back in September. I just don't understand it. This game is not good. It's boring. It's very, very peripheral. It's very derivative. It very much can be a game you could skip. You could have skipped Destiny 1. You could skip Destiny 2. You've literally missed nothing. There are 9 million other cooperative games you could play with your friends that are just as good, if not better. There's no reason to buy into the hype of Destiny. This game is not original. It's the same shit. Don't waste your money and keep spending money on a franchise that puts zero effort into developing this game. Bungie, I've said it before, I'll say it again, they're just sinking into their hype engine from all that kind of, goodwill they had from the Halo franchise over the years. They're fooling people into thinking they're doing something revolutionary when in reality, Destiny 2 is just as bad as Destiny 1. It's nothing original and not worth playing. It's a huge disappointment. They had an opportunity to improve upon what they made a few years ago. Instead, all they did was rely on the same bullshit hype, and they put out a piece of shit that's boring as hell to play and not even as good in most people's opinions as the first game. Do not play it. Number 3, Ultra Street Fighter 2. Oh, that's right. You thought MVC Infinite was going to be my top entry for worst fighting game of the year, didn't you? Oh no. Ladies and gentlemen, by far the worst fighting game of 2017 was a game that was released as a Nintendo Switch exclusive and therefore ended up becoming a major bestseller because it was the only fighting game available for the Nintendo Switch within its launch window, when in reality the game was awful. Ultra Street Fighter 2. On its surface, sounds like a good idea. It's the cast of Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, plus 2 new characters with Evil Ryu and Violent Ken, plus it's a game engine that's tweaked. You can either play it with classic graphics or the newly remixed version from the Super Street Fighter 2 HD Remix Edition that's about 10 years old at this point. It has online play components, leaderboards, and everything that you would want from a competitive fighter. So what's wrong with it? Well, there's 2 major flaws with the game. The first being, and the major reason why the game sucks, the online play is terrible. The connections are awful. Most of the time when you play this game online, the lag is so bad and so visibly bad that it's almost impossible to play this game at a high competitive level. Now, luckily for me, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo is the game that I'm the best at when it comes to competitive fighting games. So even though the connections in general were very bad, for the most part, I was able to win the vast majority of the time that I played Ultra Street Fighter 2, simply based on game knowledge. But how ridiculous is it that there were matchups where there were purely punishable and abusable tactics that I could have beaten in an offline environment easily, or hell, even in a semi-functional online environment, but playing Ultra Street Fighter 2, it made simple things such as Blanca just jumping around during a match completely unstoppable because the lag was so effing bad. The second reason this game is a piece of donkey shit is because it has Akuma as well as Evil Ryu and Violent Ken, all characters that are incredibly overpowered. In particular, Akuma, a character that was always banned from competitive play because he threw air fireballs that completely locked down the entire cast. These characters have been included in the ranked online gameplay matches. Ranked. That's right, the matches that are supposed to test competitive level skill have 3 overly powered, incredibly unfair characters included. Any nudnik who's ever played a fighting game before could tell you this was a bad idea, but apparently the game designers were so misinformed about this game, they didn't even understand how overpowered a character like Akuma could be, and they included him in the ranked gameplay. Ladies and gentlemen, all of the top spots are dominating Akumas, because all they do is jump and throw air fireballs. You can't do anything about it online. It's the brokenest shit ever. The game is completely worthless on a competitive level, because the game developers are complete effing idiots. Ultra Street Fighter 2 is a joke. And the thing is, it sold so well that Capcom announced, oh, well, now we're going to make other fighting games for the Switch. Great, but if it's as bad as this one, you could bet this is one guy who's not going to be buying those future games. Number 2, Need for Speed Payback. Now, I'll be the first person to admit I'm not a huge fan of driving games or the driving genre of games in general, and I rarely play them. When I do, typically I suck very often at them, and even though I'll flub my way through it, most of the time I'm certainly not an expert level driver. However, in general over the years, when I play more of these arcadey style racing games, I find a way to have fun with them. Sadly, Need for Speed Payback is not one of those games, and although I could go through a laundry list of reasons why this game has problems, from bugginess to wonkiness to game crashes and inconsistency, primarily the reason this game sucks is, again, one of the running issues that I had with all the game releases of 2017. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, randomized loot boxes and microtransactions. During the course of playing Need for Speed Payback, there are 4 different kinds of circuits of races. There are regular races, there are drag races, off-roading races, and what's considered a sprint, or kind of a race where you have to race against time. All 4 of these are completely unique, and they require you to design different kinds of cars and build them from the ground up, including different kinds of components, meaning the engine or, the exhaust and things that'll give those cars advantages in certain kinds of races. And that's perfectly fine. The problem is, the way to upgrade your car is to randomized opening of loot boxes to get a randomized item that you can equip on your car. Now, yes, you can buy specifically the parts that you need for your car, but they're incredibly over expensive for the amount of currency you earn in the game, and they can only be upgraded to a certain level until you have to open randomized loot boxes that you also earn from in-game achievements and currency, and those are very scarce compared to the other ones that you can buy at normal stores. Now, sometimes the randomized loot box will give you something great. Wow, I just leveled up my car 3, 4, 5, 6 levels. Other times you get a piece of crap you didn't want, and now you have to go grind repetitively in the game and do side content in order to get enough points to open up another loot box. Never in my life have I played a racing game where you can't just upgrade the car the way you want, and you can't buy what you need to upgrade your car, that it's a randomized loot box. It's blatantly created to nickel and dime the customer and try to convince them, hey, but don't bother yourself with that boring grinding. Spend a few extra dollars to buy in-game currency, and then you can buy as many loot boxes as you want. It's a disgusting practice. Now, in addition to that, the game developers seem to have lost their minds, because there will be situations where the game will take a specific kind of car and then throw you into a race that's not designed for that kind of car. For example, a drag racing car is meant to drive in a straight line as fast as it possibly can. It is not meant to do a wide-ranging, curving race across an off-roading mountain. Yet that race is in the game, and gee, guess how many tries it's going to take you to actually win a drag car race on a mountainside going all over these crazy loop-de-loop turns. It makes no sense. The game is like purposely designed to annoy the living shit out of the gamer rather than to put in challenge or any kind of fun experience. Need for Speed Payback, absolutely terrible game, designed poorly, implemented poorly, nickel and dimes the customer. It's like every possible negative thing you can have in a gaming franchise was in this game. What a freaking mess. Number 1, ultimately the game that I felt was the worst game and the most disappointing game of 2017 by far, Mass Effect Andromeda. And I'm sure that many of you are going to feel the same way, especially if you were a very long-time fan of the Mass Effect franchise, you played the original trilogy, you loved it as much as I did, and you waited with heated anticipation and bated breath for the release of the new game series that was going to continue on the franchise, only to get this. Oh my god, what happened here? First of all, the animations. The characters in this game at launch looked absolutely god-awful terrible. The facial animations looked hideous. The character, it just looked like it was amateur hour. Like they had an animations team that had never made a game before, and this was their first outing. And if that's the case, well, they actually did a pretty good job. But for something you would expect from a AAA franchise like Mass Effect, it was sad that the original trilogy looked much better than what came out this year in Mass Effect Andromeda. Number 2, the gameplay. First of all, a game that had a ton of side content, which is good. Problem being the majority of it was incredibly boring. Being able to now wander these open world planets much like you were able to do in Mass Effect 1, but instead having them be open world side questing and content with repetitive combat rather than just resource gathering was an interesting change. Ultimately though, it just was a waste of time. It was ultimately boring. You did the same thing over and over and over, and never did you actually feel that what you were doing in the game was worthwhile whatsoever. It just seemed like an ultimate waste of time, especially if you're grinding on a planet for 10, 20, 30 hours just to find out really you didn't gain anything worth it. You should have just went on to the next planet and continued the story, because then you would have been a lot more interested and occupied. And then there's the combat. Oh my god, the combat. How do you go backward instead of forward when you continue a franchise? I just don't understand it. The thing that made the Mass Effect combat engine evolve and get better over time was the new additions. Remember when they added in the ability to do amazing co-op capabilities, control the other characters and have them move around and attack from different directions, and then you could all do double team and triple team biometrics and the like? Guess what? None of that exists. They took it all out. You can only control yourself. So literally, even if you have a full team of 3 characters, you're only ever doing generic third-person shooter cover-based gameplay while you pray and hope that your teammates will actually fucking do something worthwhile. Why on earth did they go backward with the combat? It makes the game far worse and more difficult than it needs to be. How do you take something that's great and take out elements that made it better? I just don't understand what the hell they were thinking with this game. And then, of course, you've got the story of Mass Effect Andromeda, which quite honestly feels like, again, it was written by the B or C team, like it was some fan fiction or a high school group of kids writing this, because it really does seem superfluous and almost like an introductory part of a story rather than actual immediate installment of a new Mass Effect saga. And ultimately, by the time you beat Mass Effect Andromeda, you're kind of like, meh. It feels like you didn't even have to play it because nothing really happened, nothing of any significance, and ultimately the sad fact here is this game performed so poorly, sold so poorly, and everyone hated it so bad that the head developers have announced, guess what? They're not even working on Mass Effect anymore. They've completely dropped support. They're not doing any further DLCs. They're not even working on a sequel. Mass Effect may be dead in the water because Mass Effect Andromeda was such a terrible game. That is sad for a franchise that last console generation was one of the greatest, most profit-making, most synonymous with AAA that you could have. For it to come out of the gates this console generation with such a poor, pathetic outing that the whole franchise and IP might be dead, definitely makes it qualify for the most disappointing game of 2017. And that is it for my countdown of the most disappointing games of 2017. I surely hope that you enjoyed this series, and if you disagreed with me, that's perfectly cool. You'll want to shoot the shit about it. You can always tweet me at TheyCallMeDSP on Twitter, or you can post up on my TheKingOfHate.com forums and talk about it as well. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please consider giving it a like here on YouTube, and please consider subscribing to my DSP Gaming channel, which serves as an archive of all of my daily live streaming gameplay. Anything that I live stream, if you miss it live, I upload it right here to DSP Gaming on a daily basis. Now, if you want to be part of the live streaming experience, definitely check out my Twitch TV channel over at twitch.tv/DarksidePhil. It's been experiencing exponential growth this last year. It's the place to be, and I have a lot of fun sharing my gameplay experiences with you guys on a daily basis. Thanks for watching, and until next time, this is DSP saying, see you later.